Vladimir Putin says Russia can seize a European commercial ship anywhere it wants. Not in the Black Sea. Not near a Russian port. Wherever Moscow decides the ship is fair game. That's the claim now being reported by UNITED24 Media, Euronews, and News Times, and it lands in the middle of a quieter, slower fight that's been building for more than 2 years. A fight over who gets to stop, board, and hold a merchant vessel on the open ocean, and under what law. Here's the strange part. Nobody is entirely sure yet whether this is a policy. It might be a warning aimed at European capitals. It might be posturing for a domestic audience. According to the outlets carrying the story, what we have on record is a public statement attributed to the Russian president, not a published decree, not a confirmed naval order, not a single verified case of it happening yet under this specific threat. So the real question this video answers is simple. What has Russia actually done with ships so far? What has Europe actually done? And how much distance is there between that record and this new threat? By the end of this, you'll understand the mechanism at the center of this dispute. A fleet of tankers most people have never heard of, the legal gray zone they sail through, and why a single sentence from the Kremlin about seizing ships wherever necessary is being read in European capitals as something closer to a threat than a slogan. Let's start with what the reports actually say, then work outward into the part that makes this dispute possible in the first place. According to UNITED24 Media, Euronews, and News Times, Putin's statement was framed explicitly as retaliation. The reported logic goes like this. Western governments, several EU member states, plus the United Kingdom and Norway, have been detaining, boarding, or otherwise obstructing tankers that Moscow considers part of its own commercial shipping on the grounds that those tankers are tied to Russia's sanctioned oil trade. Putin's reported response is that if European vessels can be stopped like that, Russian authorities reserve the right to do the same to European ships, and not only inside Russian territorial waters. Wherever Russia judges it necessary. That word, wherever, is doing most of the work in this story. A country stopping a foreign ship inside its own territorial waters or in its own ports is normal and legal. It happens constantly under a body of maritime law called port state control. A country claiming the right to seize a foreign-flagged commercial vessel on the high seas outside anyone's territorial waters is a very different and far more contested claim. That's exactly what the reporting is careful to flag as unconfirmed. A claimed posture, not a demonstrated capability. I went back through the last 2 years of reporting on ship detentions in Northern Europe to see how we got here, and one detail kept surfacing again and again. Almost none of these disputes are really about the ship. They're about what the ship is allegedly carrying, and more specifically, who insured it. So here's the background, kept strictly to established, reported fact. Since roughly 2023, European governments, NATO, and independent maritime researchers have documented the growth of what's commonly called Russia's shadow fleet, a large number of aging oil tankers, often reflagged to smaller registries, often with ownership structures that are hard to trace, used to move Russian crude oil to buyers after Western sanctions and a G7-imposed price cap were put in place, following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. These vessels typically operate without standard Western protection and indemnity insurance, the kind of coverage that pays out if a tanker spills oil or causes an accident. That absence of standard insurance is the detail Western officials most often cite when justifying inspections. Not the cargo alone, but the safety and environmental risk of an uninsured, aging tanker moving through crowded shipping lanes. Verifying any of this from the outside is genuinely difficult. Ownership records for these vessels are frequently layered through shell companies in multiple jurisdictions, flags of convenience get swapped mid-voyage, and insurance certificates can be forged or simply absent. Researchers tracking the shadow fleet have had to rely on satellite tracking data, port call records, and physical inspections, and even then, confirming who actually owns a given tanker can take months. That difficulty is exactly why disputes over specific ships keep escalating into diplomatic incidents instead of getting resolved quietly. When Finnish authorities boarded and detained the tanker Eagle S in December 2024, following damage to an undersea power cable and several data cables in the Gulf of Finland, it wasn't a snap decision. It followed established suspicion that the vessel, sailing under a Cook Islands flag, was linked to the shadow fleet and may have dragged its anchor across the seabed. Finnish police classified it as an investigation into suspected aggravated criminal mischief. Estonia, Sweden, and other Baltic states raised similar concerns after a string of undersea cable and pipeline incidents going back to late 2023, including damage attributed at the time to a Chinese-flagged vessel, the Nunu Polar Bear, near a gas pipeline and telecom cables between Finland and Estonia. Each of those cases ended the same basic way: a detained ship, an open investigation, and no full public resolution of who ordered what. But those were cases of European states acting inside their own waters against ships they suspected of damaging their own infrastructure. What Putin is now reported to be threatening is the mirror image of that, and applied well beyond anyone's home waters. In response to the pattern of cable damage and shadow fleet concerns, NATO launched an enhanced patrol mission in the Baltic Sea in January 2025, publicly named Baltic Sentry, adding surveillance ships, aircraft, and naval assets specifically to monitor and, where legally possible, intervene against vessels suspected of threatening undersea infrastructure. The European Union has steadily expanded sanctions packages targeting the shadow fleet directly. Successive rounds of EU sanctions through 2024 and into 2025 individually named and blocked port access to growing numbers of tankers, in some packages more than 100 vessels at a time, citing their role in circumventing the oil price cap. So there's a real, escalating pattern here, and it long predates this week's statement. What makes verifying Putin's new threat hard is that Russia has not, according to the reporting available, carried out a confirmed, large-scale seizure of a European-flagged commercial vessel in open water in direct response to this specific warning. The claim exists. A matching operational record, so far, does not, at least not one confirmed in the sources reporting this story. Here's what strikes us about this particular moment. Both sides in this dispute are using almost identical language to justify themselves: safety, sovereignty, retaliation for the other side acting first. Whoever you think has the stronger legal case, the pattern itself tells you something about where this conflict has moved, away from the battlefield reporting most people associate with this war, and into a slower, colder contest over insurance certificates, flag registries, and who has the naval presence to make a boarding stick. Most people assume a country can only board a foreign ship inside its own waters or with the flag state's permission. In practice, the picture is messier. Port state control lets a country inspect any foreign vessel that voluntarily enters its ports for safety and documentation reasons, regardless of politics. Territorial waters, extending 12 nautical miles from shore under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, give a coastal state broader authority, including over innocent passage. But the high seas, beyond any nation's territorial waters, are a different legal environment entirely. A foreign warship boarding a foreign-flagged commercial vessel there, without the flag state's consent, sits on very thin legal ice under UNCLOS, which is exactly why a threat to seize ships, wherever necessary, reads as more aggressive than anything either side has publicly done so far. So if a Russian seizure like that hasn't happened yet, why is this statement getting so much attention right now? Because of what it would mean if it did. European shipping through Baltic and Black Sea approaches already runs with elevated insurance premiums and rerouted schedules because of years of accumulated risk. A confirmed Russian seizure of a European-flagged vessel on the open ocean, not in a contested strait, not inside Russian waters, but genuinely wherever, would be read by NATO members as a direct challenge to freedom of navigation, one of the oldest and most closely guarded principles in maritime law, and one that underpins commercial shipping worldwide, not just in this one region. Here's the take that'll probably get us some pushback either way. Treating this as pure bluster misses how these disputes have actually played out over the past 2 years. Each escalation, from cable damage to sanctions packages to naval patrols, has been followed by a slightly larger one. But treating it as an imminent operational order also gets ahead of what's actually confirmed. The honest read is that this is a warning shot in a legal and diplomatic argument that's been running since 2023, not evidence of a new naval campaign, at least not yet, and not based on what's been verified so far. The hardest part of covering a story like this, honestly, is the gap between what a government says and what a government has actually shown it will do. Statements from the Kremlin, like statements from any government under pressure, can serve multiple audiences at once: a signal to European capitals, reassurance to a domestic audience, or a bargaining position ahead of future sanctions talks. Sorting genuine operational intent from rhetoric aimed at any one of those audiences isn't something outside observers can do with confidence from a single reported statement, and neither UNITED24 Media, Euronews, nor News Times frame it as more than that. So we'll put the actual open question to you directly. If a Russian vessel is stopped in European waters over shadow fleet sanctions, does that justify a Russian seizure of a European ship in return, even in neutral waters? Or are those two acts not actually equivalent under the law they're each citing? We're genuinely curious how you land on that. What happens next likely depends less on this one statement and more on the next confirmed incident, the next tanker boarded, the next cable cut, the next sanctions package. That's the part nobody can predict from where this story stands today. Where this actually stands, in summary: confirmed, a documented, multi-year pattern of European and NATO states inspecting, detaining, and sanctioning shadow fleet tankers over insurance, safety, and undersea infrastructure concerns, including specific cases like the Eagle S in December 2024. Confirmed, Russia has publicly and repeatedly objected to those detentions as unlawful interference with its shipping. Claimed but not yet independently verified as an operational reality, a specific Russian threat reported by UNITED24 Media, Euronews, and News Times to seize European vessels wherever deemed necessary in retaliation. Open, whether that claim becomes policy, a one-off boarding, or nothing at all. Put yourself in the position of a shipping insurer trying to price a Baltic or Black Sea route this month. You're not pricing in a war. You're pricing in exactly this kind of unresolved threat, the possibility, not the certainty. That, more than any single warship movement, is how this dispute is already shaping commercial shipping right now, before a single new ship has been seized under this specific warning. There's a related piece of this, how sanctions packages actually target individual tankers by name, ship by ship, that we didn't have room for here. If you want that breakdown, tell us in the comments and we'll put it together. We'll keep tracking this the same way we track every story here. What's confirmed stays labeled as confirmed, what's claimed stays labeled as claimed, and we update when the record changes. If the next development is an actual confirmed seizure, or Moscow walking the statement back, we'll bring you that too.